We're sisters, best friends, and authors on a mission to help you stoke your creative fire and live the life of your dreams. We believe that purpose fuels passion and that creativity is your secret weapon for mass construction. There's never been a better time to bless the world with your dream realized. You're listening to The Kate and Abbie Show. Hello, guys, and what is up? Welcome to another episode of The Kate and Abbie Show. This is episode 19, and today we're diving into a very interesting topic. I think it's going to be very intriguing and of interest and value to those of you who are creative writers that are on your path to publishing, working on getting perhaps your first novel published. This will be of value to you. We're talking about how to prepare a manuscript to go to a professional editor. And Abs and I are going to be talking from our own personal experience with our own editor. So we're going to talk about like how to clean up your manuscript, how you should even go about doing that, what that looks like for each of us. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah. I know a lot of people out there are in the process of getting ready to send your book to your editor or looking for a professional editor and feel a little bit intimidated when it comes to the actual sending it off part of the process. It can definitely be a nerve-wracking moment when you're like ready to send it off and nobody, or maybe a few beta readers have read your book, but it's like the first real professional person is about to put their eyes on it, and that can be kind of a nerve-wracking moment. So hopefully this podcast will provide you with some helpful tips on how to mitigate those jitters and put your best foot forward and your best manuscript forward. So yeah, preparing yourself and your book.
Yeah. So I think the first question would be, okay, you're finished with like your draft. You're like, okay, this is, the end. Now what? Is that the point where you then send it off to an editor? And for me personally, the answer is no. That is not when I send it off to my editor. I go through the stages of first I let it sit for a while, which I think is something that you practice as well, Abbie. You've talked about that in YouTube videos about distancing yourself.
Yeah, that decompression time, as I like to call it, is so vital.
Yeah, key stuff. Because you're going to look at it differently a few months from now. And I've noticed that with my own writing, that I'll reread it as soon as I write it. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And then a few months later, I'll be like, oh, I see where this has room for improvement and that has room for improvement, or that doesn't jive with this. And even typos will stand out more because your eye isn't so used to like just looking at it constantly.
Yeah.
So it creates some distance and some mental clarity on that score. So first I let it sit for a while before I start going through with my own edits. And I do probably 3 rounds of edits before it sees my editor.
Yeah, same. At least, like, it depends on the book itself and like how new it is, because like some of my older manuscripts, I know they need like more revising and more rewriting than the newer ones. So it's an interesting process. Every process is definitely different, and I think that's a good thing to keep in mind when you're going into the editing process or revising, preparing for the professional edit, is to, if you've done this before or done it once before, don't expect the second one to be exactly like the first, because it's going to be different for sure, and it might need more editing or less editing depending on the state of the manuscript itself.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, so I definitely do like at least 3 rounds of edits on my books before they go to the professional editor. And that's like, to me, the most important work that you'll do on your book, because the writing process, of course, is vital. It's, of course, crucial to having a book in the first place. But you really learn a lot through editing your own work, and it's really a bad idea. It's like a complete no to send a unedited manuscript to a professional editor. Like that's not only is that going to have an effect on a big impact on your bank account, but it's also going to be kind of a waste of their time because there's going to be so many things that you could have caught yourself and improved before sending it to them.
Right.
So I think that's important to edit your own work.
Yeah, because you have to think your editor is, if you're not doing that work for yourself, then your editor is having to do it for you. So now you're bogging your editor down with like so much extra work. And all different editors, I think, charge differently. But I think a lot of it has to do with how much time, obviously, that they're spending on a given manuscript. And if they're spending like 3 times as much time trying to like wade through all this like little weird like choppy stuff that you just didn't catch because you didn't spend any time on it, like that's a more annoying and costly experience for you. It's definitely a more annoying experience for your editor, and you'll have an overall better relationship with your editor if you're looking for like a long-term relationship with an editor, which is what I would recommend if you are a writer who's like going to be producing numerous books. You're going to be writing book after book after book. You're not going to want to just like be hopping around the internet, excuse me, trying to find different editors. You're going to want to find that, one right editor for you and stick with them. Abs and I have a kind of unique experience in that we have the same editor. Shout out to Jen, if you're watching this, you're awesome and we love you. So we have a great relationship with our editor, and she's edited all of my work. And I think as you continue to write, you'll be sending her work and stuff. Yeah. So it's like you want to have not just like, oh, this person edited my book good. You want to be able to have a relationship with your editor where you're like, you get to know that person and trust that person and see that, they add value to your work and actually help you bring out your voice through your writing. They can recognize your little patterns and language choices and kind of get used to how you write. So then when you send them another book, you have someone who actually has like a history of editing with you now. So it's so much better than like, oh, let me go on, Freelancer or a freelance website and try to find someone different each time. It's just, I feel like it won't be as good of an experience if you're going to continue writing novel after novel.
Right. Plus, a good editor, in my opinion, does pick up on your style and wants to match it and not like put their words into your manuscript. Like they will be suggesting edits and inserted pieces, but good editors will get to know you and your writing style and try to match that writing style and make it feel as natural as possible because they want your finished manuscript to feel smooth and like you wrote the whole thing, not like you wrote most of it and then your editor inserted these parts into your book after the fact. Like you want it to all feel smooth. And once your editor reads more of your work, they will get familiar with your style and want to have you hopefully as a forever relationship for future books going into your future publications. So I think that is another huge bonus to having your having a relationship with an editor rather than like having just a new editor for each book, or even like an editor who's just like copy editing. Yeah. Like there's definitely a difference there. How about you go into like the difference between copy editors and then editors like Jen, who will do more
right. So
developmental stuff.
Right. So from what I understand, and hop in with your own knowledge because I feel like you probably know more on the technicalities here, but copy editing is basically like someone who's going to do really rudimentary, like that sentence is grammatically screwed up. Here, let me fix it for you. Versus like, I feel like that character based on how you've crafted them wouldn't say something like that. What about something more like this?
Right.
Someone who's going to make creative suggestions to you like that. And also like give you options and be like, oh, rephrase this in your own words, et cetera, et cetera. And really like work with you on giving you an honest opinion if something sounds like it doesn't jive with the character. Like my editor has done this with me, and I'm always so grateful when things like that get pointed out, because those are things that you don't want to slip through the editing process. And then it's your reader reading the book and they're like, oh, that doesn't sound like something she would say. You don't want it to get to that point, because then your reader feels disconnected from the character. It just feels out of character for them to be doing that. If you can get an editor who is going to point out things like that to you, that's fantastic.
Yeah. And those are the things that are, like, in my opinion, way more significant than a typo.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
a typo is like, okay, whatever. I mean, you don't want to have typos in your book, but I've seen them in a lot of popular books. I've seen typos. So it's like those things don't really matter as much as the story itself, and making sure that your characters are, you know, acting the way that they should be, and that everything sounds good and everything reads well.
Right. Like, I've never heard a person be like, I would have enjoyed this book if it didn't have a typo in it.
Yeah,
Says
exactly.
no one ever. But
Exactly.
what will cause them to enjoy it less is when they feel disconnected from the characters or the meaning of the book. Mm-hmm. What's
Yeah, so
driving
your
the
editor
story
can
forward.
help you with that, for sure.
Yeah.
So finding a good one who can help you with that is I think really important. And then you have to, like, just let go and let yourself be open-minded, because there will be comments and critiques from the editor, and they're not meant to be negative at all. They're meant to be constructive feedback. And every editor is totally okay with you being like, nope, I like it how it is. And that's totally fine if you don't want to implement what the editor has suggested. It's like, it's totally up to you. It's your book,
Right.
obviously.
And I think, too, just to interject, it's important to have a sample edit done, because it's important to find an editor who vibes with you. And I'm going to put it really loosely like that, because I can't even put it into words. It's like you can relate to them. You feel comfortable working with them. That level of comfort is something you'll have to decide for yourself. If you're like, yeah, I'm really jiving with, or if you're just like, something about this editor, like, I just don't feel comfortable working with them. I don't understand, like, the way they're talking to me doesn't jive with me. I don't really like the edits they're putting into the book. So get a sample edit. I cannot reiterate that enough. And a good editor will actually initially be like, oh, I'll send you a sample edit, and they'll, like, bring that up right away. So that's fantastic. That's how I met my editor. She sent me a sample edit. I was like, yeah, wow, that's great. I totally jive with that. And everything went from there. But do the sample edit first and see how you feel about working with that person, because you're kind of like working as a team to make your book, you know, the masterpiece that it has the potential to be. So, like, try it out first and see what you think of the edits. And I have had in the past, far before the Blood Race series, editing experiences with another editor that was a terrible experience. So I've seen both sides of this coin, where when you're working with someone who totally doesn't get what you're trying to communicate and totally doesn't get your style, and they're just kind of trying to interject their own style, and they're kind of like, no, you shouldn't be doing it this way. You should do it this way. And you're just like, oh my gosh, this is a nightmare. You don't want that to be your experience. So do sample edits, correspond back and forth, get to know your editor a little bit before you jump right in.
Yeah, I think it's really important to get that sample edit and to make sure that you find the right person to work with. And then once you do find the right person to work with, it's equally important to prepare yourself for feedback and for the comments that you're going to get from your editor, and to be open-minded to change. So I know a lot of writers, when you first finish your book and you maybe put in some edits yourself and then you send it off, you know that the editor is obviously going to make some edits and some changes and some comments, but you kind of, in the back of your mind, you're like, this is the best I could do. And it is, which is awesome. But it almost, like, makes you feel a little bit personally attacked when someone finds something wrong with it, or something that needs to be edited about it, or a critique of some kind. And I know that it can feel like, what? I tried my best with that part. Like, why are you criticizing it? But it's really, like, for the best. So opening your mind to, okay, well, they see this way that it could be better, and our goals are the same. Like, we both have the same end game. We both want to make this story the best it can possibly be. That's your editor's goal, and that should be your goal as well. So looking at it from someone else's perspective and being like, okay, well, I'll definitely take that comment into consideration, because I wasn't able to see that before because I was focused on whatever other things. And I did my best to make that the best it could possibly be. But someone else will see it completely differently, and that's totally okay. So I think it's really important to be open to those comments and critiques, because those are the things that are going to make your story even better, and just keeping an open mind.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you need to look at it, like you said, like kind of detach from it and not take it personally. And so what I wanted to ask you, Abs, was, so when you're getting a manuscript ready, so like what are the like first 3 steps after you write the end?
Well, first step is definitely to let it sit for a while, which I know we've talked about. I've talked about that on my channel a lot. Like at least 3 months is the ideal. It's like, that's like the low water mark. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Right phrase?
Right.
Is like 3 months, and then up to like even a year. Some manuscripts of mine will sit for longer than that, or I'll go and edit them once and then I'll put them aside for another year and wait and see what I decide to change about them or whatever later on. But after it sits for a while, the next step is to go into it with as fresh of eyes as I possibly can and make my initial edits. And for that, I'm looking for developmental stuff. I am looking to revise certain parts of it. I'm looking at the subplots and how they flow. I'm looking at the main plot and how it flows and progresses. I'm looking at the story structure, all kinds of different elements, which I actually go into in my video about revising a novel. That's like my whole process after I write the end. So if you want a more in-depth, like coherent guide, check out that video for sure. But after that, I hand it over to my first beta reader / editor, unofficial editor, which is my mom, our mom. Mm-hmm. And I know whenever I say that on YouTube or on other places, it sounds like, oh, well, that's absolutely so partial. Like, how can your mom have an unbiased opinion of your work? But you would be surprised by how brutally honest she is.
Yeah, I would say it really depends on what your mom is like.
Yeah.
We have a very brutally honest mom who is actually really good at editing.
She is.
She's great at editing.
Yeah.
Like, you could get a job doing this if you wanted to, because she's really good at it.
Yeah, she really is. And she'll always tell us the truth about our manuscripts. I mean, she edits Katie's too. And
right. Like our editor has even commented on like, wow, this is so cleaned up already. And I'm like, thanks, Mom.
Yeah. Thank our mom. Yeah. But no, she's great. And to me, it's like, it's so convenient and awesome if you have those people in your life, whether it's your mom or a friend or, some relation of yours that will be absolutely honest with you. And you know that they'll be honest with you and they do not care if your feelings are hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they're expecting you to be,
right.
grown up about it and look at it from a critiqued standpoint of like, I'm trying to make my work better. You're trying to make my work better. Let's work together on it.
Exactly.
And I think if you can look at it from that objective standpoint, then you'll always do a good job.
Right, because believe me, it's going to hurt your feelings more if you have a bunch of like
bad reviews.
Yeah, bad reviews of people saying that they didn't like the book because like, oh, this, and this. And you're like, oh, I wanted to edit that part out.
Exactly.
And it didn't happen because no one told you in the beta reading process. But this brings up a point that I wanted to hit on is, so beta readers come first. And a lot of people, I think, confuse beta readers with advanced readers because you want beta readers to read while you're still in the editing stages so you can still change stuff. Advanced readers are going to be people who are just reading it before it is published. So I've seen a lot of confusion with those two groups, thinking like beta reader, advanced reader, alpha reader, group reader, feedback reader. It's like all this jumbled up mess. And it's like beta reader or, whatever you want to call them are people who are going to be reading your book while you're still in the editing stages. And they're super important because the feedback they're giving you, you're implementing as you go.
Right. Yeah, whereas ARC readers are right before the publication.
Exactly.
And they may find a few errors here and there. And
but you definitely don't want to get a bunch of developmental edits from them and be like,
right. Yeah, and they may even provide you with some useful feedback. Like my ARCs provided me with some useful feedback, and I was able to make a few changes in my book, but like you want to be pretty much done.
Yeah, you don't want to be like,
part.
oh, let's hold off on the developmental edits till we're in like the pre-publishing stages. You don't want to wait that long.
Yeah, and that being said, like that's another reason why you want to edit your book as much as you possibly can before you send it to your editor, because at least I always have this in the back of my mind, like I don't want to add hardly anything after it comes back from my editor, because because those parts won't be edited by her. You know what I mean?
The magical wand of the editor has passed over this, and then if you add anything to it, that part, like it's like kind of like editing in post when you have something like that one unrendered clip.
Yes.
That like won't load properly.
Exactly.
That's what the piece you add in is like.
Yeah. So
and
it's like
you just feel a little bit nervous about it.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So then you're like, oh, that part's not going to be edited by her. So I actually did that when I did 100 Days of Sunlight, because I added a few scenes after it came back from her, and then I just like sent her those scenes by themselves in separate Word documents. Like, could you look at this, please? Yeah. And she was so good about them, and she just like edited them all on like separate pieces.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Which is like it's great if you can find an editor who's like that, who will just like be like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do that, and not be like, well, that's extra, and I'll send you an invoice. Like, you know, you don't want to work with people like that.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So like, because I mean, yeah, it's great to be able to just bounce something off of someone.
Right.
Like,
yeah. And to have that relationship like we were talking about before.
Right. To be able to just, you know, ask someone a question, and a great editor will also like encourage you. My editor even read my blurb and edited it for me. So it's fantastic what can happen when you have a great relationship with your editor. I was going to say something off of, yeah. So one thing too is like proofreaders are really going to be the ones who catch like all the like last minute detail stuff. And I see a lot of people are like, do you need an editor and a proofreader? Like a lot of people ask that, like, oh, can I just do one or the other? And I would say like, personally, no. I would definitely do both distinct processes, because the editing, you're doing all the developmental stuff that we just went over. You're having dialogue back and forth with your editor. You're making all these changes, creative style changes. And then with proofreading is going to be after you've already put in all your work, your editor has edited everything, your beta readers have given you feedback, maybe you've added some of that. Now the proofreader is going to catch all those little things that like slip through the cracks inevitably. So I wouldn't skip out on that process, but you also don't want to look at a proofreader as an editor, because they're not. It's too total. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you can never have too many eyeballs going through your book before it gets published, even if it's you over and over again.
Like, how many times you read the 100 Days of Sunlight? Like, an unbelievable amount of times.
I lost count. Like, I read it so many times because I had a little problem with the hyphens, the line breaks and the hyphens. That's a whole other story for another time. But I had a little problem with it. And so I had to go through the paperback version and then the hardcover version and read them both and make sure that there weren't any weird hyphens anywhere. And then I realized, like, I could have just done that on a Word document by clicking find a hyphen and then go through all of them. For some reason, I thought it'd be quicker to read the whole book. It was not. But that's, you know.
So is it safe to say you've read 100 Days of Sunlight like 10 times?
Oh my God, at least.
Wow.
Probably like 50 times.
I can't imagine reading a book that many times, man. That's
what I
crazy.
mean. Like I was talking about my audiobook on my YouTube channel. I'm going to be talking about that this week. And I was thinking about like how I've literally, like, I could read it with my eyes closed because I know it so well.
That's amazing. See, I don't know my own books.
Like, I know
that
excerpts
well.
of it, just like I was listening back to some of my recordings and I was just like sitting there just like saying it with myself. I remember it just off the top of my head.
Amazing. You could just have like a recital, 100 Days of Sunlight live YouTube recital, and you just like start saying the whole thing. That would be a fun challenge, actually.
That would be.
That would be cool.
Pretty intense.
But I think we should, wrap up here. So recapping what we've gone over, read through first let it sit. Let it sit, like Abbie said, for like 3 months, if possible, or a year. Let it sit. Let it, age like a fine wine, like some really good cheese. Okay. Like, let it sit there, then return to it and look at it with a fresh pair of eyes. Do several rounds of edits yourself and have some beta readers look at it and give you feedback and enter that feedback before it goes to your editor. Find an editor that you can have a great relationship with and have constructive, fun dialogue with about your book, so you're building it to be the best thing, the best book possible. And don't skip out on the proofreading process.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I think that, like, do we want to add anything to that?
No, that pretty much covers it. I think that it's important to make your book the best it can possibly be before you send it to the editor, and then just like let yourself have peace of mind that you did your best. I know that the nervousness can kind of be from this like what's it called? Like a thought loop of self-doubt of like, oh, did I do my best? Did I do as much as I could have done? And really, like, you could ask yourself that question all day long. So just don't get into that negative thought loop. Just rest in the facts that you did your best, and then just see what the editor says and have an open mind to comments and critiques.
Yeah. Open mind. Open mind is a good thing to have as a writer. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, give it a thumbs up. If you're on YouTube, tell us in the comments below what you thought of it. If you're getting ready to have your book be sent to a professional editor, if you're looking for an editor, where are you at in that stage? We'd love to hear about it. If you'd like to support the show, where can they go to do that?
Patreon.com/The Kate and Abbie Show. Ever notice we don't have sponsorships and ads on the show? That's why, because we have a Patreon so that you can support us and keep this show sponsorship and ad free. So head on over to support that. Another way to support, which we love all the time, is by sharing this podcast with a friend who is either a writer or in the editing stages, or just might be a fan of two author sisters sitting at this table chatting about all things creative.
Absolutely. We love it when you guys share. We love sharing with you. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you in the next one. Stay stoked.
And rock on.